Good morning. Thanks for being at the Soul Care Conference today. We got Curt Thompson leading us today, and so we're excited to have him in the house. And hopefully you've been able to check out his podcasts and some of his books. Curt leads a ministry called Being Known, and he's going to tell us about his ministry and then get into Soul Care today. So let me give you the rundown for today so that everybody's on the same page. Is that all right? So everyone knows the schedule. So here we have a first session for an hour. We're going to talk about why we need soul care. We'll break for 15 minutes, so we'll have time to mingle, go to the restroom, whatever you need to do. And then we'll continue with our second session at 10:30, and we'll break for lunch for a bit. And then we'll have some subs and sandwiches together. And then we'll do Q&A at the end. So here's what I suggest. If you hear something that intrigues you or provokes you, write it down, and we can field those questions in session 3 during Q&A. So that's what session 3 will be all for, is your questions, all right? So write those down, and we'll ask them. Sound good? Yeah. All right, let me pray for us. Father God, we come to you knowing that we are broken, and we are in desperate need of your help. And so, God, I pray that you give us the truth that we need, the vision that we need, the help that we need, God, today, to care for ourselves, to understand ourselves so we can help and care for others too. God, I pray for Curt as he leads us today, that you'd fill him with your spirit and give him the ability to bless us today as we devote these hours to you, consecrate these hours to you. God, I pray that they be fruitful. I pray that you be with us today and make us more like Jesus through it all. In your name, amen.
Amen.
All right, Curt, come on up. Let's give him a round of applause.
Is this, it's on, yeah? It's working, yeah. Oh, man. Welcome to Saturday. I'm just so grateful to be here for all kinds of reasons, 2 of them in particular right here. Dory and David, it's just really great to be in your presence. I say this every place I go, I'll just say it for myself, that following Jesus is hard to do. It's just not easy, and anybody who says differently, I think, needs to come see me. All right, I've got space for appointments for that. And as we like to say in our work, the brain can do a lot of hard things for a really long time, as long as it doesn't have to do it by itself. As long as I don't have to do what I have to do by myself, as long as I'm with you and you're with me, I can do a lot of things that I cannot do by myself, which of course is a reflection right off the first section of the creation narrative where we read in 2:18 of Genesis that it's not good for the man or the woman to be alone. And there's something about that. And so I just want to say I'm really grateful to be here because I know that I expect to be different. I expect to be different by the time our time together has come to a completion. And I'm also, I just want to invite us to consider that, Jesus is really serious when he says, look, where 2 or more of you are hanging out together in my name, like I'm already there. The question is not, like, you don't have to ask me to come. Right, we often do in our prayer life. We ask you, Holy Spirit, to come. Like, look, dude, like the Trinity's already here. Has been here since before we got here waiting. Right? Because the Trinity sees you in his mind, and we're often not paying attention to this. So I just want to say that Jesus is so delighted to be here already. Because he wants to go to work and to continue work that he's already been doing in our lives. And so this just gives me great joy that what we can do. Okay, so here's another thing. So is for us to be attuned to, like, I'm going to offer a lot of words. And I want to assure you that the most important thing that's happening here this morning are not the words I'm going to say. The most important thing that's happening here is, what is the Spirit doing within and between us? That's the question. What's happening to us? What is Jesus trying to do to form us, even in this short time that we have together? Because remember, like, you might think, like, gosh, there's just not that much time. Like, we could talk for weeks about spiritual formation, about soul care. We got, like, half a day, not even that, right? You feel like we don't have that much time. Look, for God, a day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as a day. God doesn't operate in our time frame, which is really good news, because I think he's taking way too long to get things done. Amen? And, I think he could easily say, well, yeah, that's because, like, if you were a little more cooperative with me, I think it wouldn't take as long, right? So I just want to assure us, and I want us to be curious about, at any given moment, when you hear something, when you sense something stirring, it's not, I just want to assure you that that's not just about something I'm saying. I want us to assume that the Spirit is at work. And the question is, are we paying attention? And to what degree are we doing that? Does that make sense? Pretty clear? Okay. A couple other things. Just some introductory comments before we enter into the first part of our time. Well, I guess, as we're entering into our first part of our time. When the topic is soul care. Like, what is soul care? Why is soul care important? So we're going to ask this question. Well, we might want to ask, like, what's the soul? And here's one thing that it would be fair to say, that neither neuroscience nor the Bible defines what the soul actually is. Scriptures don't tell us what it is, because the Bible doesn't work in terms of definitions. I don't know if we know this or not. Like, it doesn't explicitly tell us these things. It assumes these things. Right? If you read the foundational text, if you read what we call the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, and in that Eastern culture, they would talk about the soul as something that we are, right? This is Genesis 2:7. And the Lord God formed the man from the mud of the earth, and he breathed the breath of life into man's nostrils, and man became a living soul. So from the Hebrew standpoint, breath plus body equals soul, right? By the time you get to the New Testament, folks are being influenced by a different kind of culture. It's the Greek culture. Aristotelian and Platonism and all these kinds of things that would say that, like, the soul is something that you have. There's your body, and then there's your soul. And the soul is the thing, this deep thing, right, that we talk. But the thing is, like, nowhere in the Bible are we going to say, like, well, which one of these two things is correct? And let me assure you, like, that the Bible doesn't seem to think that knowing the definition is all that important. The writers, they're assuming, though, that there is something about the soul and that it's really important. And the question is, what does it mean for us to care for it? Okay? And that's what we to do. Now, a couple other things. These are all preliminary reflections. Look, you don't have to come listen to a shrink talk about this, right? You don't have to do that. Like, you could go on the internet. There are libraries filled with books that you could read, podcasts that you could go to. There are institutions and organizations that are doing all kinds of things that are really beautiful and good and rich. You don't have to come here to do this, to get all the definitions and all the things that we can do to care for our soul. But I want to invite you to consider something else. I want to invite you to know that one of the things that we want to do here this morning is to have us leave imagining about the world differently than when we came in the room. I want us to imagine that we are going to imagine about the world differently than we came into the room. So we're not going to answer all the questions about, like, what does it mean to care for our soul, and what is the soul? We're not going to answer all those kinds of things because, like, we only got a short period of time, and there are more questions that we can answer. That's not the point. Because as I tell people, look, you can listen to me for half a day. You can listen to me for 3 straight days when I talk at conferences for that long about neuroscience and spiritual formation, blah, blah, blah. I know you say, look, at the end of the day, when you're done listening to me, you're not going to be that much smarter. But you're like, well, crap, why am I here? Why did I pay money? Right? Look, because my job is not to make you smarter. My job is to inspire you to go home and do the work. That's my job. Every time we come to church, every Sunday, we are remembering what it means to live in the material world that we read about in the Bible. What does it mean to remember? Remember is to reconnect members of our soul, because our souls have been in the process of disintegration from the 3rd chapter of the Bible forward. Are you with me? And so we're not necessarily, and look, we can take notes, and I want to invite you to do that. But mostly, I'm interested in what is the Spirit going to do to open windows and doors into enabling us to imagine things differently about our lives and about the world when we leave than when we came in. And one of the most important ways that I want to invite us to imagine things differently is this. We live in a world in which we have been formed and trained to believe, this is from the dawn of history, but in the last 500 years it has become, we've got our own particular way of doing this with modernity, right, and the Enlightenment and so forth, and that is this, that we are far more interested in answering the question, what am I doing correctly, than I am in answering the question, who am I becoming? And I want to invite you to consider that the biblical narrative talks a lot, of course, about what are we doing and what are we not doing. Right on? But it is doing so primarily because it first asks the question, who are we becoming? What we're becoming and what we're doing are in synchronous conversations with each other. Right? Those things are both equally important, but there is a particular sequence in which this takes place. And we often get that sequence backwards. So oftentimes, people will want to come to gatherings like this because I want to take my notes and I want to know, what am I supposed to then go and do? These are not bad questions to have. These are not bad answers to offer. All that is important. I want to invite you to consider, who have I become in the next 4 hours? Because what I do is always going to be an outgrowth of who I am becoming. Now, there's another element of this that's also important that we've been hoodwinked into thinking about, and that is well, who am I becoming? Because I think that to answer that question, I'm going to be on that quest to answer that question by myself. And here's another important thing that we're going to talk about in just a moment, and that is this. In order for me to answer the question of who am I becoming, I cannot answer that question by myself. I do not decide who I'm becoming. We decide who I'm becoming. That's just the way we are made, and you can't get away from it. And part of why it is that we have so much anxiety, thanks be to God, because it keeps me in business. I don't mind this idea. I mean, I tell people, if you're a shrink and you live and work in the Washington, D.C. area, I am set. I'm never going to be out of a job. But I am so anxious at the end of the day, primarily, neurophysiologically, anthropologically, spiritually, because I'm disconnected from you. And if I'm disconnected from you, I will necessarily be disconnected from Jesus. And so, in order for me to answer the question, who am I becoming, I need your help, and you need mine. Are you with me? Here's the last thing. And this is a thing, I'm just going to say this, not because it's fun, because it's not, but it's sobering. But I say it because it's important for us to pay attention to. When we read the text about the sower, right? What do we know? We know that only 25% of the seed that is sown bears fruit. Now, the fruit that it bears is immeasurable, but only 25%. So here's the statistical likelihood of what will happen at the end of today. Now, this community may be in and of itself, en masse, a complete outlier. But the statistical likelihood is that only about 25% of you are going to take what we do here and do something with it. Every sermon that you hear, this is because this is who we are. This is not an indictment. This is not a critique. This is a description of what it means for us as communities to be human beings. But we can decide that we don't want to be in the 75%. But I will assure you, evil is real. It is the second smartest force on the planet. It's far smarter than any of us in this room. And its mission is to devour you. Its mission will be to devour this community. It does not want you hearing anything that we talk about today. It does not. It wants you to imagine, oh, no, I won't be in that 75%. I'll definitely be in the 25%. And that's our first mistake. For us to assume that we know that we would not be that guy, that woman who won't put these things to work. Are you with me? So I don't say, like, because like I wake up every morning, I'm like, look, because I look at most of my day. 75% of my day, like you might look at me, you might think, gosh, I'm not really sure that dude's a Christian. You know, because like I tell my people, look, I am a professional sinner. I am not an amateur at this. Like, I'm really good at it. And so these are just some preliminary stuff. You with me? Ready? Here we go. We're going to start with one text, one very short text. And that text, we're going to have three parts of the text. And we're going to talk about the first part in light of the second part, in light of the third part. We're going to talk about the first and the second part largely in our first time together here for the next 45 minutes. And then we're going to talk about the third part in the next hour when we talk about, well, what are the things that we do once we discern what does it mean for us to become. Ready? So here's the text. And we're going to talk about neuroscience and other things in the process. John chapter 16, verse 33. I have spoken these words to you so that in me you will have peace. In the world you will have tribulation. That's a King James word. All other English, in the world you will have trouble. In the world you will have trouble. But be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. For I have overcome the world. So there's the three parts. I've spoken these words to you so that in me you will have peace. Second part, in the world you will have tribulation. Third part, but be of good cheer. And I want to invite us to imagine how this verse does a couple of things. One is it provides a model for what formation and soul care look like, while at the same time it also models the life, death, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus. All in that. So, let's talk about the first part. I've spoken these words to you so that in me you will have peace. I've spoken these words to you. Now, anybody here listen to the Bible Project? Like, these guys got it going on, don't they? Love these guys, right? And so one of the things, if you listen to Tim Mackey enough, like you recognize that when we talk about the Word, the first thing that we're talking about is not the Bible. The first thing that we're talking about is Jesus. Now, the Bible is how we get access to Jesus, but the Bible is not the first thing that we're talking about. And when you look, though, at the text, you recognize that the Word, these words that I've spoken to you, we might say, well, if you're reading in John 16, maybe he's just talking about the paragraph before that. Or maybe he's talking about all the words in the farewell discourse that start in chapter 14, 15, 16, and then end with the high priest prayer in 17. Maybe those are the things that he's talking about. Or maybe we're just talking about the Gospel of John. But one of the things that we will learn is that these things I have spoken to you means that it's not just those words. It means the entire Bible are words that Jesus is speaking to us. When he says, these words I've spoken, we're talking about Genesis, Exodus, Isaiah, Revelation. All these words I've spoken to you, are you with me? So that in me you will have peace. So I want to invite us to consider that where do the words that Jesus spoke begin? They don't begin 4 verses earlier. They don't begin at the beginning of the Gospel of John. They begin at the beginning. And in the beginning, God was making the heavens and the earth. When you look at the first words, we hear a model for what it means to care for our soul. In the first 2 pages of the Bible, you hear some things that are really important for us to know. Here's number 1. By the time you get to the end of the first page, verse 26 and 27 of chapter 1 of Genesis, we read, and then God said, let us make humankind in our image, and let them multiply and fill the earth and rule over it. That's what he says. Let us now. If we're careful readers and we read that first page, we have to recognize, let us make mankind in our image. What does it mean? If we are here, like for us to be in the world, for us to know what does it mean to care for my soul, I have to recognize I have to ask the question, what does it mean to be human? And the first thing that is important for us to recognize is that you are an image bearer. To be a human being means I am made to bear God's image. And what does that mean? There are lots of things. We could spend all day just talking about what it means to be an image bearer, but there are some things that are important I just want to share with today. 2 or 3 things. Number 1, to be an image bearer means that we are called to do what God does and live like God lives. Would that be fair to say? And what is God doing on the first page of the Bible? He's making things. He's making stuff. And the stuff that he is making are artifacts of beauty and goodness. This is what God does. You think like, oh my gosh, like what's my role? Like the Westminster Confession. Y'all hear the Westminster Confession? You're familiar with that? Y'all? Yeah. You're like, okay, I'm not as smart as the guys that come up with that, but I got some questions. Right? Because when you read like the Westminster Confession, things like, and what is the chief end of humankind? Right? To love God and enjoy him forever. Did I get that right? Yeah. And I would say, really? Because when you read the first page of the Bible, one might say like the chief end of man is to create beauty and goodness in the world, co-creating it with his creator. And in so doing, yes, of course, we love God. But like God's not so worried that he needs us to be sitting around loving him all day long. Because that's, like, loving God is an outgrowth of what we were primarily made to do. Are you with me? So here's the question when it comes to caring for our soul. What does it mean for you to consider, to ask the question, goodness, what does it mean for me to create and curate beauty and goodness in the world? Now, I want to tell you, like, we don't have to be, Maku Fujimura. We don't have to be like professional artists. Like, we create relationships. We create Bible studies. We make children, and there are plenty of them here. I'm going to be, like, I'm a grandfather as of 6 months ago. And right, okay? Like, and it's like, and the rumors are all true. And like, I'm like going to be the worst. Our grandson is going to be baptized tomorrow. Like, I'm going to be that guy. This whole notion is like we make children. But then we also make spreadsheets. And we make curriculum for Sunday school. And we come up with creative ways of like doing whatever is going on over here. I don't know what that is, but there's a lot going on over there. We create hospitable spaces for people to come in and have conversations. You see what I mean? There is an endless array of ways in which we are called to imagine how today, when I leave my front door, am I called to create and curate beauty and goodness in the world. This is what I'm first called to do. Because, the Hebrews, like, they are great filmmakers. Great movies, they don't explain everything along the way, right? They just show you stuff. They expect you to come and do some work. You're right? Great novels don't explain every other page. They expect the readers to come and do some work. When you read the Bible expects its readers to come and do some work. So when you read the first page, the Hebrew authors are expecting you to get what is God doing? You might say, oh, he's just making the world, day 1, day 2, day 3, so forth and so on, right? You'd think that. But like, what is it telling us about who God is? And if we are then made in God's image, holy freaking cow. Are you with me? Okay, that's number 1. We could say a ton more about that particular thing. One thing I will say about it, though, is this. There's another thing about God being God's image bearers. And that is that when you get to the 26th verse, one might expect, oh my gosh, how old is that one? 5 months tomorrow. So like, you not yours. Yeah, this way, people just randomly walk around picking up children. It's awesome. I just like who like what well what that's just an amazing community. You just pick them up, take them. It's great, right? Yeah, you don't mind. You love that, right? It's great, right? So this whole notion that we get to verse 26, one would think that if we were following the pattern, that it would go something like this, because on day 1, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Day 2, God said, day 3, God said, "Let the waters from above, water below," and they separate, and they do. Day 4, day 5, let there be, and there was. And it was good. The Hebrew word for good can also be substituted for the Hebrew word for beautiful. And so here's the thing. By the time you get to verse 26, you would expect the text to read, and God said, "Let there be humankind," and there was humankind. It's not what it does. God has a conversation about it. God is wondering about it. God invites the entire divine council into the room. Let's have a conversation. Do we want to do this? You think Jesus, right, the member of the Holy Trinity, he's like, "I'm not sure this is a good idea." I see Good Friday coming. I mean, I get the whole resurrection thing, but like, You with me? God has made us on purpose, fully knowing everything about who we're going to be. He wants us in the world because he is a God of deep intensity that is immeasurable. And then you read Ecclesiastes 3, verses 10 through 12. For God will make all things beautiful in their time. For what? He has placed eternity in the hearts of humankind. What does eternity mean? Now, we think about eternity, we think about time, rightly so, but for the Hebrews, the word eternity is not primarily a measurement of time. It is primarily, anytime you read this in the Hebrew text, the word eternity, it is primarily a function of the depth, of the intensity of the life that God lives. And that's what he has put into us. And what does that mean? That means you can't measure how deep your longing is. You can't measure how badly, how much you still want your Father's approval, despite the fact that he continues to behave badly. You can't measure how badly you want meaningful work. You can't measure, as a parent, how deeply you long for your son or daughter to come to know Jesus, for them to have a meaningful life, how much you worry about that not happening. We can't get away from the eternity that is a reflection of the intensity with which God has made us on purpose to create beauty and goodness in the world. Are you with me? And so here's the other thing, just another thing about this whole, this is all the first chapter. This is who we are becoming. Because this whole notion of God wanting us to create beauty and goodness, get this, it means that he has also created us to be objects and icons of beauty and goodness that are emerging. You know, it's easy to talk about certain human beings, women in particular, as being beautiful. We don't use that kind of language to talk about men. But it's the language that God would use. It's the language that Jesus would use. It's easy for us to use that language to talk about children. Oh my gosh, your son is so beautiful, your daughter is so beautiful. Especially to the men in the room, when's the last time anyone has said to you, my goodness, like, you're just such a beautiful man. Right? We laugh nervously about it. And the reason we laugh nervously about it is because this whole sense that we are becoming icons of beauty, the question, like, what are we becoming? That we are becoming the kinds of icons that people are going to look at and will be tempted to worship in the new heaven and new earth. Because this is what is happening. Are you with me? But here's the thing. Most of our lives are so cluttered with our lives that this isn't anything that we would ever imagine. And this is exactly where evil wants it kept. Evil does not want you imagining that what God is about is turning you into a goddess and a god, turning you into a daughter and son of the king who's going to rule angels in the new heaven and the new earth. Evil does not want you knowing about this. The moment you're tempted to believe this, everything changes. Amen from that section, right? Are you with me? But here's the thing. By the time you get to the next page of the Bible, remember, these words I have spoken to you. Remember, these words I have spoken to you so that in me you will have peace. You get to the next page of the Bible, and you recognize, oh, there's a bit of a blueprint and a bit of a sequence about how God wants to create these icons of beauty and goodness. Remember, this is what it means to be soulful people, and how are we going to care for this? And we get some answers to this. The first thing is in 2:7, we've already cited this, and the Lord God formed the man out of the mud of the earth. Right? God does these kinds of things with intention and with proximity. God does not create beauty and goodness from a distance. He does it up close and personal. And we like this idea until this idea shows up. You get a little further into the text, and there's some other things that you discover. The first thing is that, Adam is given a job. We know this. And then God looks around and says, gosh, everybody else is paired off, except Adam doesn't seem to have a partner that's going to be really serve the purpose that all these other creatures have, right? And it's not good for the man to be alone. It's not good. And I want to invite us to consider that comment is not just an observation on God's part telling about the situation on the ground. It's the most haunting verse of the first two creation narratives for me, because it is also a herald of what's coming. Are you with me? And so then what does God do? God could just as easily have said, he could have gone over and he could have done this well, okay, I'm going to form somebody else out of the mud. Painless. I tell Adam this is what we're going to do. You with me? It would have been so straightforward. No. Instead, God commits the first wound in the Bible. Do you know this? The first wound in the Bible is Genesis chapter 2. And Lord God caused the man to fall asleep, and he performed general surgery. Right? Cardiothoracic surgery. He's going to take a rib. Notice, Adam isn't even given a choice. There was no consent form signed. Here's the general anesthesia. Here's the side effects. You wake up, we're going to have to get you up and walking pretty quickly. Make sure that you don't get atelectasis and your lungs don't collapse and all the things, right? No. Adam is just out plowing the field, having a good time, and wham, over he goes. And when he wakes up, what does he behold? Goodness and beauty. How does he respond? Poetry and song. This is what it's important for us to recognize, that part of how we create goodness and beauty in the world includes wounding. The question is not, are we going to be wounded people? The question is, what is the purpose of the wounding? I want to assure you, you already know this because you're parents. Your children are aghast at the ways you wound them. You may have milk in the blue cup or the red cup, but you may not have juice. I can't believe that. The nerve. You with me? We wound our children daily when we don't give them everything that they want and all the things. This is what we're doing. We discipline our children. We nurture our children. We are forming our children. My wife, Phyllis, she's a licensed clinical social worker, and she's a child development specialist. And she has a couple of things that she likes to say about children. Number one is that children are expert observers in the world. They observe things that the adults in their life have long ago chosen to stop paying attention to because it's too upsetting. Right? The kids in the family systems that are all messed up, that would be all of us in here, right? Those kids are well aware of things. They are the ones who are willing to ask the questions that the adults won't want to talk about, right? This is what they do, right? She said they are expert observers and they are horrible interpreters. which is why a parent's job is to interpret the world for our children. But how are we to do that if our own interpretive skill sets are not what they need to be? Are you with me? And so we get to this moment where we recognize that God really wants to form beauty and goodness, and there are times when wounding is part of that, but the purpose of the wounding is to create beauty and goodness on the backside of it. We're going to see that one page later in the Bible, the purpose of the wounding that evil commits is a very different outcome. Then we get to the end of the second page of the Bible, and we realize all these words I've spoken to you so that in me you will have peace. All these words I've spoken to you so that in me you will have peace. It's not good for the man to be alone. All these words I've spoken to me so that what? So that in me you will have peace. You will not have peace in your information. You will not have peace in your theology. You will not have peace in your pastoral sermons. You will not have peace in all those things. All of the things that we want to do, you will have peace because you are watching me, watching you. You are gazing at me, gazing at you in the middle of the worst moments of your life. In the middle of the most joyful moments of your life. I've lost 3 brothers to cancer. And you wonder, like, what the heck? In me, you will have peace. And it's easy for us to live as long as I just have that information that in Jesus I will have peace. I want to assure you, information is not enough. If I don't sense Jesus' presence, my being in him here, it's not yet fully real. So we get to the end of the chapter 2, and we get this sense like, oh, this is how God's going to do this work of creating beauty and goodness in the world. And the man and his wife were naked and unashamed. It's the last verse of chapter 2. And you wonder, like, why do we need to tell that? Why do we need to say all this? I want to invite you to consider, again, imagination. I want you to imagine some things. Number one, I want to invite you to consider that this is not just a comic, because the Hebrews are, like, remember, they're great screenplay writers. This is not just about marriage. This is not just about men and women. This is about a couple of things that are really important for us to know. The man and his wife, they're differentiated. Males and females, as it turns out, are far more like each other, contrary to popular belief and perhaps even experience. Males and females are far more like each other than we are not like each other. But in the ways that we are not like each other, we are infinitely. You can't measure the differences in which we are. Fair enough? Right? But I can assure you that if I were given the task of creating goodness and beauty in the world, I'm going to have a project. I'm going to go do whatever this is going to be. Whatever the next thing is. I'm going to do. I sat with my son. I was trained as a classical pianist growing up, and then I stopped, much to my wife's chagrin. But our son is a musician, and he's a keyboardist. And 2 nights ago, we sat at the piano for the first time. He's like, "You want to have some lessons?" I'm like, "Let's go." So for the first time in like a long time, I'm like, "We're going to do this. We're going to create beauty and goodness in the world," even though it's embarrassing for. We can tell a whole story about that. But here's the thing. If we're going to do this, if I'm going to create goodness, what do I want to do? I want to do that work with people who are just like me. Are you with me? I've told this story many places, and I get married. I don't know how long it was, 6 weeks, 6 months after being married. I've been married. I'll be 39 years in September, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't really want to marry Phyllis. I wanted to marry me. That's who I wanted to marry. I wanted me to look like her. That's the most important thing. I wanted me to look like her, but I wanted her to be me. You know, all the things. I want you to think like me. I want you to think that, we know when the right time it is to go to the movies. All these things that we want, right, that you want to have agreement on. Because I really don't want to work with somebody who's that differentiated. Like, yes, sure, great. But in the back of my mind, I was like, as long as we do it the way I want to do it. Are you with me? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks be to God. Right? Okay, marriage therapy right here in front of everybody. All right. Right, so here's the thing. Not only do I not know who I am if you're not in the world, like, look, men only know that they are men because women are in the world. If women weren't in the world, we would just be a bunch of nematodes, right? And some people think that's what men are anyway, right? We're just kind of like walking around all looking the same, doing the same thing. You know, you're with me. I only know who I am because somebody's different in the world with me. I, as a middle-aged white dude, I don't know who I am if I do not have my African-American sisters in the world. I can't know who I am fully. So this is not just about males and females. My wife and I were in Ireland for 10 days. We just got back on Sunday. And I'm like, you know, it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. And the grief goes to the center of the earth. Are you with me? I would really just love to do this with people who are just like me. But we have all kinds of categories in which I need to be doing this work with people who are not like me in order for me to, this is this question, who am I becoming? I cannot become who I'm going to become if I'm not doing this work with people with whom I'm differentiated. Man and his wife were naked. They were naked. For the Hebrew, this is not just a commentary about the state of their physicality, part of it, but a lot of it has to do with just acknowledging that we are vulnerable creatures. We are vulnerable in ways that no other creatures are. We're the only people who have to wear clothes, right? Is that right? Some people put clothes on their dogs. That's weird. like that is super weird. That's like diagnostically weird. Like no dog has ever asked to have that jacket. Like I've already got a coat on, thank you very much. I don't need the extra sweater. My goodness. What we humans, anyway, okay. And cats, like I don't even know, like that's just, okay. I need your help and I need your protection because I am a vulnerable creature. The question is not, am I going to be vulnerable today? The question is, in what way is my vulnerability going to be put to use by God in order for me to create goodness and beauty with someone else with whom I have great differentiation? How can I be linked together with people with whom I am so very different? And if this is what I'm able to do, this is how God forms me while he's using me to co-labor with him to form beauty and goodness in the world. We become artifacts, icons of beauty and goodness in the world as we are creating it. Are you with me? First 2 pages of the Bible. Then the question becomes, to care for our soul, to care for our combined sense of humanity. Remember that it's not just my soul. Like my soul is only cared for to the degree that we are doing soul care together. Because like we do not survive apart, like neurobiologically, we do not live in the world apart from other people. But we live in a world that is trained to have us thinking that we do. And in fact, we come to church and each of us are listening to the sermon in terms of like, how am I, Curt, personally taking this in? I read texts in the Bible, and how is this speaking to me? That's not what the people who wrote the Bible actually read the text. Like they all read the text together in the room at the same time, and we're all going to wrestle with this thing together. Are you with me? Like we don't even read the text. We're not even, like the text is to be read certainly on our own, yes, but then with whom am I going to co-create and explore the text together with? The man and his wife were naked and unashamed. The Hebrews had lots of words that they could have used to describe their setting. The man and his wife were naked and happy. The man and his wife were naked and confident. The man and his wife were naked and whatever. But there's something that's inherent in the use of this word. And one of the things that we know about shame, even from a neurobiological standpoint, is that it is something that we encounter as human beings early and often in life. Humans can encode and then begin to respond to shame as early as 15 to 18 months of life. Long before I have language, long before I have any sense of being able to make sense of what it is that I am feeling, thinking, why I'm feeling these things, we are long practiced with it. And one of the things that we know about what shame does is that shame disintegrates systems. It does the very opposite of, it's not good for man to be alone, so we're going to give man a partner. It does the very opposite. Are you with me? Which means that when it comes to the formation of our souls, when it comes to our soul's care, evil is going to wield shame at every opportunity that it has. And it is subtle, it is silent, it is ubiquitous. We incorporate it, we live with it, we respond to it in all kinds of ways of which we are completely unaware. And then we pass it on to our kids. And then we extend it into our social circles. And then we extend it generationally. And so when we read, the man and his wife were naked and unashamed, we're recognizing that the writers are not just telling us, this is what it means for us to be people of caring souls who care for others. They're also alerting us to what's coming. But we're recognizing that these are the words that I have spoken to you so that in me you will have peace. So let's just go back and ask some questions before we get to the next part. Who are the people with whom you have some degree of differentiation, but are the people who are coming to find you, just like Eve was brought to Adam? Who are the people by whom you're being deeply known? Now, this may be happening here in this space. I'm going to be cared for and formed to the degree that I am being deeply known by someone else. Someone else through whose eyes I can actually eventually see myself. And it's all in the first 2 pages of the Bible. Are you with me? Who are the people that are going to help me do this? Here's something else that it's important to know. God could have said, let there be the world in its entirety like that, and he didn't. He takes 7 days. There's a sequence to things. To what degree am I aware of the story that I'm telling and the sequence with which I tell it? The Hebrews are telling a story here. And they didn't just say like one sentence, like God made the world. No, he gives us some details about the progression of the story. And our stories also have progressions. We have early parts of our story, we have middle sections, we have later sections. And in all of those sections, we want to be curious, where is shame still hiding out? Where is God wanting to heal the part of my story that perhaps is, even now as we're together this morning, we're being reminded of them? We have relationships that we've long forgotten, that we've worked really hard to not remember, that we've buried, and we're having to burn energy to keep the memory of those relationships out of my conscious awareness. A couple of years ago, a series of things that happened in my life that I was just, were like, oh my gosh, like I have a list of people that I need to forgive. A list. And as it turns out, these are people who, by being on the list, means like I've actually enjoyed holding a grudge. I've actually enjoyed, like, I'd much rather just stay mad at them because I've got good reason to be, because of the way that they've mistreated me over the years. Some of these, like, decades. Like, that's just a lot of energy that I got to burn to contain all that I don't even, like, I've been doing it for so long, I don't even know that I'm doing it. It's just so automatic. But that is energy that God does not have available to me to create beauty and goodness in the world. Are you with me? Am I aware that first God formed the man out of the mud of the earth, and then he breathed the breath of life into man's nostrils? We said, we like to say, look, if you take mud and you take breath, you put them together, you have a human soul. If you take either one of them away, you don't have a human being. They are equally important. My body, the mud, and the breath, this interior sense of life that we have that we mysteriously can't measure. If we take either one of those away, we stop being human. But there is a sequence. One is not more important than the other, but there is a sequence to these things. And so we like to say, in terms of neuroscience, we like, look, first we sense things. First human beings sense things, and then we make sense of things. Human beings do not make decisions because they primarily, first and foremost, make sense. We make sense in our decision-making process of things that feel ultimately comfortable enough for us. That's how we really make decisions. And the question is, who is in my life such that I feel comfortable and confident enough to make the choice that is wise to make because I am not alone? It's not good for the man to be alone. All anxiety all anxiety ultimately is a function not so much of I don't have enough information, I don't have enough skill set. All anxiety is ultimately a function of I sense myself being alone in the world. When we read at the end of Matthew 11, this famous word of Jesus, all of you who are weary and heavy laden, come unto me, I'll give you rest, right? All y'all who are anxious, you come to me, right? When you're anxious, he doesn't say, when you're anxious, read Genesis 1 and 2. You know, like the Gideon Bible. Remember, anybody here familiar with Tony Campolo? All right, I knew Tony, and I remember one of the times I heard him speak, and he was talking about the Gideon Bible, and he said, like, if you look at the back of the Gideon Bible, in the hotels, Gideons put the Bibles in the hotels, right? And he said, and there's a list of things like if you're anxious, if you're this, if you're that, and like if you're lonely. He said, like, and I went into a hotel once. He said, and I saw if you're lonely, read da da da, and then somebody had like written in there, and if you're still lonely, call Lola at da 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 whatever. It's one way to market, I guess. But you follow me? Like, we have these answers. I want to just give you information. And what is Jesus saying? Jesus says, when you're anxious, come closer. Come closer. How many of us here in the room, anytime we're anxious, we also feel ashamed that we're anxious? Yeah, right. 2 of you, right? Only nobody. Everybody else is too ashamed to raise their hand, right? This is right. I said it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere, right? But this is the thing. Like, I get anxious, and then I feel like, no, I'm a Jesus follower. I shouldn't be anxious, so I feel ashamed. So I'm not going to tell anybody that I'm anxious. And if I'm not anxious, if I'm anxious and I don't tell anybody, it means in the act of not telling anyone, I further separate myself from them. And I become more anxious. And then I do this. You see how this goes? And imagine the list of things for which we are anxious, for which we say nothing. Because I'm supposed to just do this on my own. It's not good for the man or the woman to be alone with anything. For us to care for a soul, this is the other thing, right? Like the question is not like, how am I going to care for my soul? No, the question is, how are we going to care for my soul? How are we going to care for your soul? I ultimately, I need you. Because this is fundamental to the first 2 pages of the Bible. Now, we can hear all this, and we can think, like, gosh, this is, because I'm going to say this, we're going to lead into this, because we've got about 7 minutes before we take a break. I want to start, we have these notions, like, okay, we're going to create beauty and goodness in the world. And okay, so here's a question. If you couldn't be afraid, if you couldn't be anxious, if you couldn't be ashamed, what's the next artifact of beauty and goodness you would create starting when you leave here today? What's the next risk you would take? What's the next hard conversation you would go and have? What's the next new active thing? I want to try this. I want to repair that rupture. I want to do these. This is what we're going to do, because shame and fear are not going to be in charge of me. But I cannot, by myself, make myself be unafraid or unashamed. I have to have you. Are you with me? Now, evil doesn't want this to happen. It's important to know. Evil wields shame, and we feel bad. We can talk about shame for 3 days. We're not going to do that. Evil wields shame, and we feel bad, right? I feel anxious, and then I feel ashamed that I'm feeling anxious. Right? I feel bad. But it's important to know, evil wields shame primarily because its mission is to keep you from creating beauty and goodness in the world. It doesn't just want to devour you because, like, you're a sinner and that's what you... No, it can't tolerate beauty and goodness. It can't take it. And so it will do what it can to become a parasite on it. You are an artifact of beauty and goodness that is emerging. We, in our practice, we take care of all... I was born and raised in Ohio. Sorry? Did you say go blue? Yeah. Born and raised in Ohio. I just want to let you know, in our practice, we treat all kinds of psychiatric conditions. Depression, anxiety. You know this is coming, right? People who cheer for Michigan. Okay. Like, you deserve that. Okay. You should be ashamed of that comment. That's what I should say. Yeah. And when people come into the office, the primary way that we present ourselves to the office is that I'm a problem to be solved. I have a condition, right? That's what you go to the family practice for. Yeah, I've got this swelling. I have a problem to be solved. 500 years of modernity has taught us that we are primarily problems for God. We get to the 3rd chapter of Genesis, and we discover that it's not just that my storytelling mechanism it's not just that my story is shattered by shame, but the way that I tell stories, my storytelling mechanism is shattered. And by the time we get to where we are now, most of us, when you even think about, like, what's the gospel? We have lots of different ways of talking about what the gospel is. But how many of us think about, well, the gospel, let's just remember that the gospel does not begin in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The gospel begins in Genesis 1. Just because we are broken does not mean that God has in any way changed his mind about what his plan was in the first 2 pages of the Bible. Jesus has come to correct those matters, to put us on track in order for us to become icons of beauty and goodness in the world, so that when the new heaven and earth gets here, we will be able to take it. That's a very different way than saying, well, the gospel, the leading edge of the gospel is that I'm a sinner in need of a Savior. That's completely true. But that's not God's first thought. His first thought is, I have not forgotten what I set out to do. Everybody else here has. Many of us live as if we think the Bible begins in Genesis chapter 3. We think we're problems to be solved. Are you with me? We come to see the psychiatrist, and I have anxiety and depression, and like I have all these problems. And I would say, and I say to people, you know, when you're anxious and you think that your brain is broken, you think you're having a problem, I want to say, like, look, your brain is doing exactly what we would expect it to do given the life you're asking it to live. Evil doesn't want you becoming aware of the life you're asking yourself to live. Evil doesn't want you becoming aware that you're actually beauty and goodness that is waiting to be revealed. But this is exactly what happens in the 3rd page of the Bible. When the serpent comes and starts to have a conversation. Is it true? Is it true that you can't eat of any tree in the garden? Dude, I mean, like, evil is smart. You know, Adam and Eve, they're just minding their own business, doing the thing that they've been made to do. Look, here's something else, right? There was no forewarning. Like, God didn't say, hey, by the way, at some point, there's going to be a creature that's going to show up. It's going to look like an angel of light. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be smart. It's going to be convincing. You're going to need to be careful about that. There was no warning of this. God gave them one simple command. Are you with me? One simple thing. And as it turns out, life has not changed. People say, gosh, things are just so complicated. Things are complex, complicated. I'm like, no. Life is very simple, as it turns out. Like as a psychiatrist, it's very simple, and it is excruciatingly difficult. But it is not difficult because it's complicated. It's difficult because we swim in an ocean of shame and fear, and we construct our boats, each of us, and we do it individually because, of course, even though I'm married and having sex with a woman that I'm married to, like, we're also, like, I got all these parts about my life that she doesn't know about and vice versa because, like, I'm just too afraid to say these things. Are you with me? All the married people should be nodding their heads, right? Because we're working to, like, do the right thing. I'm not being curious about what am I becoming. Where's the beauty emerging today, tomorrow? How am I being an agent of the emergence of that beauty in someone else? Who are the people who are enabling the emergence of the beauty within me? How is that happening? It's very simple. God commanded them to eat of all the trees, of all the fruit in the garden. Commanded them. It's the first command. You are to eat of, you are to take, you are to receive wisdom from me in all the ways, even from the tree of wisdom, even from the tree of life. Take from it. One tree you may not. Very simple. But we create our boats to help us survive these oceans of things. And we construct them out of a lattice work of the stories that we tell, that we must tell the way that we do to protect ourselves from our shame and our fear. Are you with me? And so when it comes to the care of our soul, when it comes to our formation, one of the questions that we're going to ask is, what do we do about this reality that we are all in these boats to some degree or another? All construct them out of all the stories that we've had to tell, right? It's not just that something happened to me, it's something happened to me, and I had to tell a story about it to help me survive the thing. Right? I grew up in an evangelical Quaker community. I'll just tell this last story real quick. Evangelical Quaker community. Now, some people, when they hear those two words together, like, not really quite, it's like military intelligence. I mean, is that, what is that? What does that mean? I'm not really quite sure about this. And I grew up as the proverbial loving Christian home, right? Which is like, well, life sucked, you just can't talk about it, right? That's what the loving Christian home. Anybody here who's grown up in one of those, you kind of know what I'm talking about. And I grew up with God-fearing parents, but my brothers were born. Well, when I was born, my brothers were 18, 16, and 11 years of age. Right? My oldest brother went off to college. I was born a week later. Like, he comes home at Thanksgiving. He's like, what's this? My other brothers are like, yeah, we still haven't figured it out. We don't really know what this is. And so I had parents who raised sons in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. Like, for some of you in the room, that would be like talking about like history in the 17th century. Yeah, it was funny, wasn't it? It was funny. Yeah, it wasn't funny for me, okay? Can I just assure you? My brothers called me Little Joseph. You know, the coat of many colors? Because by the time I come along, my parents are in a very, very different stage of life. And there are lots of things that I get to do that they don't get to do. And then, like, and I hear about this, right? But in all of this, I did not, like, my father, who a Jesus lover, like a good and generous and kind man, was also a guy that, like, you didn't want to piss off. You didn't want to make him angry. Not because he's an angry guy, but because, like, everybody's working so hard to make sure that we don't make him angry. And I have a mom who's got her own history of unresolved traumas that never really got worked through. And so I grew up in a house where I know that I'm deeply loved, and at the same time, I'm afraid of anger, and I end up working really, really hard to make sure that nobody gets anxious, which means I'm not allowed to be anxious, and I'm not allowed to be angry. I don't know if you know this or not, but humans are, in general, prone to being angry and anxious. Do you know this? Which means if you think you're not supposed to be that, it's like thinking, like, I'm not supposed to be breathing. This is not easy to do. And so what do? I make up all kinds of complicated stories in order for me to help build my boat to cope with these kinds of realities. And then you get married and you find out, like, oh my gosh, like, I can get pretty angry at this person pretty easily, and what am I supposed to do with this? Because you're not supposed to be it. You follow me. Burning lots and lots and lots of energy, trying to do the right thing. But the question is, who are we becoming? And when we come back, we're going to talk more about what are some things that we can do to answer that question? All right. Okay.
All right, let's take a break. It's 10:19 now. Can we, do you remember what time the next session starts at? Is it that, I didn't, my phone's over there. Let's just say 10:30, get back in, 10:35, okay? We'll come back in here for session 2. Sound all right? All right, thanks guys. All right, folks, come on in if you can hear my voice, and take a seat and quiet down. We're going to get started session 2. So right now, Curt's going to cover how to care for our inner life and how to care for the inner life of others. So let's get ready. Come on up, Curt. We'll get at it. Thanks.
There we go. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for most of you for coming back. So here's the thing. As I said earlier, we could talk about shame for a long time. And in some respects, you don't really need me to do that, because y'all kind of know what life is really like. Life in the world, you don't need me to explain that things are hard and why they're hard. It is true that there are ways in which life is hard that we're often not that aware of. For instance, what we said earlier about how the way that shame plays a role in ways that we're not aware of and therefore we're not paying attention to. And so therefore we actually end up thinking that life is complicated, when actually we're just really ashamed and really afraid. When I say just, I tell people it's kind of like this. If you're going to do a weightlifting workout routine, and you're just starting, like the bar is usually 45 pounds. You can bench press a bar. Most people here could do that. You put more and more weight on it. And oddly enough, by the time you're benching 230, the mechanics of bench pressing 230 are no different than the mechanics of bench pressing 45 pounds. It's not complicated. But I can tell you that bench pressing 45 pounds is not like bench pressing 230. You have to work harder. And you don't just do it overnight. We're going to do this work slowly, deliberately, in order to become durable objects of beauty and goodness. We have been practicing shame and all of its disintegrating processes for thousands of years, and for each of us in this room for virtually our entire lives. We're good at it. We're so good at it, kind of like I said earlier, I'm good at being a sinner. Like, we don't even know when we're doing things that is setting us up to be more likely to just be more ashamed and more afraid. And so therefore do all the things that we end up doing, right? Because we end up committing violence. That's what shame is. Shame is first and foremost a violation. If you were to have an accident and lose an arm, it turns out that the fundamental tissue pathology that takes place when you lose an arm is no different than what happens if you get a minor bruise. The difference is the intensity with which it happens. But it's not like it's that much more complicated. Now, if you got to replace it and repair it and so forth, that's a different question. But the nature of violence begins with shame. And it thickens to the degree that we don't pay attention to it. And so I'm gonna start with this next part. So we don't need to say a lot about the middle part of John 16:33. Right, we've said, so these words I have spoken to you so that in me, right? We're recognizing this now, that if I'm going to have peace, peace is going to happen because I have some felt sense of being seen. We like to say we'd be seen, soothed, safe, secure. To develop secure attachment, we got to have this. Also, to develop secure attachment, we have to have the experience of the repair of ruptures. It's important. We said earlier, right, that when God commits the first wound, there is a purpose for this that leads to beauty and goodness. It doesn't lead to disintegration, but there is a wound. We do this with our children all the time. We do this but we will have ruptures with our friends, with our spouses, with our whatever. We're going to have ruptures. The question is not, like, are we going to have ruptures? The question is, are we effectively able to repair the ruptures that take place? Children do not need parents who are perfect. Like, look, the only way that you're not going to screw up your kid, don't have them. It's the only way you don't screw them up. Jesus is not worried about the fact that we are parenting children imperfectly. He simply wants us to be in the game. He wants us to be parents who can identify ruptures that we've created and that we can repair them effectively. That's what he wants us to do. We would say that this is what God has done in Jesus. He is repairing the ultimate rupture. My son Nathan just turned 32. He just graduated with a PhD in policy analysis. I don't even know what that means. And so he's looking for work now, and he's a musician, and he's a keyboardist, and he's written some stuff and put some stuff out there. And we just love being around Nathan. When Nathan was in 8th grade, he came to me one day and he said, Dad, this stuff that's going on with you and Mom and Rachel is his older sister by 3 years, who's a pastor in Charlottesville. And he said, this whole thing about Jesus, like, I understand that you all get it, but, like, I don't get it. And so I just want to let you know that. I don't really get it. I'm not really sure what I'm going to be able to do about that. I'm like, okay, fine. And so this is kind of where he found himself in 8th grade. And then when he's like in 9th grade, between his 8th and 9th grade years, he has this experience at a church camp that, just like knocks his socks off. And he meets Jesus, and things change dramatically. He went to, anybody here heard of a school called Gonzaga? College, high school, right? This is where Nathan went to school, all boys Jesuit school. And by the time Nathan was done, people were saying, like, dude, like, you're going to be the next pope. Because this is a kid who starting a Bible study, like all these kinds of things around in a tradition that he's not, a part of, but like he's developing friendships, all these things. Like, and I'm like, I don't even know what happened to this guy. I'll tell you, like, Jesus happened to this guy, right? Okay, fine. He goes off to college, and when he's a sophomore in college, he comes home at the break, and he says, I think it feels like the wheels are coming off. And he's had some courses, some things that, like, he's in the middle of an existential crisis. And I was the guy who, when I was 13, I meet Jesus for the first time, and the same kind of thing happens to me. Just this thing that happens to me. But by the time I was 13 and a half, I was in the middle of my own existential crisis that lasted for 20 years. And it was maddening for me. And by the time I kind of emerged from that, I thought, oh, this will be fine. If my kid ever has that kind of thing, like, I can't wait. My kid has, because I'm going to be the dad who's had this experience and who know, because I didn't have a single substantive conversation with my father my entire life before he died when I was 17. And I'm like, I'm going to be the guy who has the conversation with his son. I'm just like, dude, like, we're going to be fine. So he talks about this, and we're talking, and like, and I don't know if you've ever had the experience of, like, you're in the middle of a conversation, and you hear yourself saying things, and the things that you're saying are things that you should not be saying. And it's almost as if the words start to take on a life of their own, and they're going to try to escape from your mouth more quickly before you can stop them. Are you with me? And so by the time we're in the middle of this conversation that's going for like, 2 hours, and by the time we get to the end, I essentially say to him, look, if you're not following Jesus, I think you're an idiot. Not a helpful thing, not a helpful message to send. Now, our son and I, to this day, I don't deserve to have the kids that I have. I'll just say that. And I love my boy, and my boy loves me, and there's no question about that. But in that moment, I behaved really badly. And it wasn't until the next day when I became aware that I was the rupturer, and that my problem at that moment was not because I was afraid that my son was not going to follow Jesus. My worry was that in not following Jesus, I was going to lose my boy. It wasn't about some abstract thing called faith. It was about our relationship. Are you with me? And I was afraid that I was losing it, and I wasn't paying attention to that, and so I behaved badly. And 3 days later, he leaves to go back to school for the spring semester. And I am a mess. I'm apologizing up one side and down the other. 2 weeks ago by, we might have a phone call, and I'm like, I'm just so sorry. I'm like, all the things, right? He comes home for spring break. I'm just so sorry. And are we okay? I'm like, this, and I told him, like, I'm aware that, like, I really screwed this up. And of course, he's in no better a place in the middle of his existential crisis. I've just now piled onto it. Because as it turns out, what are existential crises about, right? Well, they're about what? It's about being alone, right? All distress. It's about being alone. It's not good for the man to be alone. Like, can we get this into our minds? When you're worried about something, the question is not, what do I need to do? The question is, who should I be calling? He'd come home for spring break. I'd say, are we okay? Yeah, we're coming. He'd come home for like at summer break. Like, are we okay? Because I'm worried. Because I'm not okay. The following semester in the fall, he was going to head off to Europe for a semester abroad. And I'm now like, no, we're not going to have contact with him, for a while. I'm like, are we okay? He said, Dad, we're okay, but if you ask me one more time if we're okay, we are not going to be okay. And I said, okay. But my guess is that there are parents in this room who've hurt your kids, and you didn't even mean to. Some of us have hurt our kids. We didn't even know we were doing that. We are kids who've been hurt by our parents, and our parents didn't repair the ruptures. And that's what tribulation's all about. It's about wounds that took place beginning in the 3rd chapter of Genesis and violently just ripple through history and time and relationships. Are you with me? And then we collect all this stuff and we don't do the work of repairing ruptures. And over time, Nathan, had this regenerating experience of life in the Trinity. And that's all well and good, but he and I, it's like we put a marker in the ground, not literally, about what it meant for me to do what I did to him. What does it mean for us to be people who are formed in the middle of tribulation, right? So we don't have to say much more about that. We know what this is like. We can all imagine it in our lives. Well, remember, then he says, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. Now, notice, when he says this to his disciples, of course, the disciples don't have a clue about what he's talking about. The disciples, in fact, many of them, if not most of them, don't really even have a clue until after Pentecost, right? Even at the end of Matthew's gospel, and some doubted, even at the ascension. Some doubted, right? So even, these were people who are with the king, and they don't get it. How many of us here, there are just parts of our lives that we don't get? We don't get I don't get myself, I don't get Jesus, I don't get the world. Are you with me? Yeah. Amen. Okay. And so, what does Jesus then mean when he says, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world? So, all these words I've spoken to you so that in me you will have peace. And so when we go just a few chapters farther down the road in the Gospel of John, we get to John chapter 20. And this is the first day. This is the new day. John's gospel, as many of you probably know, John's gospel is a gospel that has lots and lots and lots of echoes with Genesis. It points to Genesis a great deal. And one of the ways that this happens is in John chapter 20, there's a couple of scenes that many of us are familiar with, right? On the first day. What is that? On the first day. Notice, when you look at the creation narrative, day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, God rests. And what's day 8? Day 8 is when the man and his wife are supposed to step into the world and start to create and push the boundaries of Eden into the wilderness, creating beauty and goodness in the world. Day 8, the first day. Are you with me? And what happens? The first day, Jesus appeared among them. The doors were locked. They were shut and they were locked because they were afraid of those who had killed their master. Here's a question. We are here in the room. How many of us have certain parts of our stories that are locked behind closed doors? I will tell you, you have some of them. I have them. We might even know what they are. And I'm not going to unlock those doors. Notice what Jesus does. Jesus does not knock on the door. Right? He does not barge through the door. He doesn't say, hey, it's me. He appeared. He does not come violently on the first day. It's Genesis all over again. Are you with me? Notice, John's gospel is telling us, he is about doing new things. So we do not lose heart. Even though our outer nature is wasting away, our inner nature is being renewed day by day. For this slight momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all measure. For we look not at what can be seen, but what cannot be seen. For that which can be seen is temporary, but that which cannot be seen is eternal. This is Paul in 2 Corinthians, and he's saying, like, there are certain things that we're paying attention to. And get this, like, you buy a car, you drive it off the lot, and as soon as it leaves the lot, it is old, right? You couldn't get your money back. Are you with me? What does it mean when we hear that what Jesus is doing, like, today you are new, tomorrow you will be newer. The next day you will be newer than that. Like, we don't have a category in our human minds for this, and this is what is happening to you. Jesus wants to enlarge our imaginations, but we can't do this by myself. I don't do this just by reading things. I don't do it just by reading spiritual literature. I don't do it by like reading Richard Foster's Celebration of Discipline. All those things are helpful and necessary and good, but the question is, how are we primarily going to enter into this kind of work? Well, the first thing that we have to know is that if we're going to do the work of spiritual formation, do the work of soul care, we do not do it violently. Again, Genesis chapter 1, the first one. As God was creating the world, it's the first line, as he was creating the world was what? Formless and void, and chaos was in the water as a wind of the Spirit of God swept over the deep. In every other Near Eastern ancient creation narrative, every single one, the Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Persians, every single one, before their gods would create human beings, they first went to war. They first have a bloodletting. They first commit violence. And what does God of the Hebrews do? And the wind of God hovered. He hovers. How do we do work? I was not hovering with my son Nathan. Oh, maybe I was hovering, but I was hovering very anxiously. God's hovering, and then what does he do? He speaks and brings order and purpose, but he does so without violence. How many of us with our anxiety are, right, the more anxious I get, the more urgent I feel about all the things I want to be the way I want them to be. Are you with me? How many of us have these places where we feel urgency? And what is Jesus like? We'd like to have more information. We'd like to have more power. I'd like to have greater capacity to change and manipulate my world. And Jesus says, come closer. I'm like, I don't need to, I need you to do something. I don't need you to tell me to come closer. But this is what Jesus does. He comes closer. He comes into the room where they're afraid. Who is coming into those places in your story where you're afraid? The doors are closed and they're locked. This is how formation happens. This is how care happens. I was at a gathering of about 40 pastors on Long Island last fall. And it was there for a day-long spiritual soul care formation retreat. And I asked the question that I will always ask pastors, which gets me the same answer just about every time. And the question I ask is, who is in charge? Whose responsibility is it to take care of you? And they look at me like I have two heads. Nobody takes care of pastors. Pastors are the ones who take care of everybody else, which is why they're left so vulnerable. No human being, when you answer the question, who takes care of you, and no human being who says nobody, like, I can tell you, you're talking about a person who is quite anxious, if that's who you're talking to. None of us can live life like this. Everybody should be able to answer the question, whose job is it to take care of you? I have 3 guys that I meet with every Tuesday morning and have for over 25 years. If I'm not in that room every Tuesday morning, or most Tuesday mornings, I am a dead man. Pastors are given all this work to do and all this responsibility, and if they are not being cared for, at some point it's going to be the same thing that happens when we read, it's not good for the man to be alone. Because when we are alone, in our vulnerable states, and I don't have protection and I don't have help, I'm going to be in trouble. Because that's not how we're made to live. Like, we are made to live neurobiologically. Every baby comes into the world looking for someone looking for her, looking for someone looking for him, and it will stop when you're dead. And when you die, you are going to go into the next life looking for Jesus, looking for you. Because this is how our brains are made to work. Who's coming to find you? Who's looking for you as you were looking for them? Jesus comes looking for his disciples, because they sure as heck are not really serious about looking for him, because this guy has messed up their life. Right? And what is the first thing that he says to them? Peace. I would be thinking, like, he comes in, they see him, they'd be like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. No. Look, this is a guy that didn't make sense to them when he was alive. His death made even less sense, and you think that now that you're back, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, no way. Are you with me? This is what we're doing with Jesus all the time, which is why he says, peace be with you, and then what does he do? He shows them his wounds. He shows them his wounds. Now, we read that and we're thinking, oh my gosh, this is the real guy. He's proving, like, he's not like some other Greek or Roman mythological god who, there are all kinds of stories in the ancient world about gods that are killed and they come back to life. Not a single other story has a God that comes back to life with scars. He comes with wounds. And he shows them his wounds. And then he says something we're going to come back to in just a moment, because the text then reads about something else, right? But Thomas was not with him. Now, I just want to say this, like, Thomas gets a bad rap in my view. We say doubting Thomas, right? Have you ever heard of him called doubting Thomas? Because I will not believe until I put my finger in his nail prints and I put my hand in his side. Like Thomas, like, no, we've seen the Lord. When you read the original text, we have seen the Lord, there is not an exclamation point after. It's a period in the sentence. They're like, yeah, we've seen him. You're like, really? You sound like thrilled, excited. No. Here's the thing about Thomas. Thomas is the guy in this group. If you read Thomas in John 14, if you read Thomas in other places, Thomas is the guy who is willing to say the things that everybody else is thinking and everybody else is afraid to say it. Let's go to Jerusalem and die with him. They're all thinking this. You said that you've shown us, well, where's the Father? This is a guy, like, he's getting after, like, he is a serious person. And we're like, but we read this story about him, and we're like, oh, he's like the guy that, like, look, no, he's just honest. And when we talk about doubt, this is another thing that's important to know. Anytime I say I'm doubting something, I'm doubting my friend, I'm doubting Jesus, it's important to know that, like, the human mind cannot live in the world without faith. It's impossible, right? You're going to all stand up, and when we're done, we're going to go get lunch. And the moment that you stand up, you're going to walk across the room, and you are going to trust, you're going to have faith that the floor is going to hold. You with me? We have to operate with faith just to get through the day. All the day, 24/7, we're living as people of faith. And so when I choose not to have faith in one thing, I'm not so much doubting as I am shifting immediately to put my faith in something else. That's what I'm doing. And so when we think like, oh, I'm doubtful of this, what you're really doing is saying, I'm actually trusting other data that I'm now choosing to trust instead of trusting the data that I want to trust. Are you with me? And for all these disciples, and for Thomas too, because, like, look, if I can't see these things, if I can't trust him, then I'm left with what? I'm left with me to trust. And anybody who's awake, if you think that trusting yourself is the way to life, like, we know you end up in my office. Again, like, I love to see you, but you follow me. Like, I don't just trust myself. In order for me to be who I need to be, I have to have you in the room. Thomas knows that he longs for Jesus to be in the room because he's just left with himself otherwise. 1 week later, which means we're now on day 15. It's new creation. Notice, like, this is new creation. This is Genesis 1 and 2. Are you with me? John is telling us that God has not forgotten the first 2 chapters of Genesis. This is his purpose for you. Over and over, we have to be reminded when we go to church on Sunday, our job is not just to have the Eucharist and say the prayers and listen to the sermon and all the things. My job is to remember that I am deeply connected to a community, that through the power of the Holy Spirit and through the text of Scripture, I am being recommissioned once again to walk out into the world and to create and curate beauty and goodness. And who am I going to do that with? Who are going to be the people? Where are the repairs that I need to make? What are the ruptures in my life, in the lives of others, that I'm going to now be an agent of helping to repair? And so he comes again, Jesus, and this time he comes in and he says, peace be with you. Peace be with you. And he goes right for Thomas. He doesn't have any other conversation. He speaks right to Thomas. And he says, Thomas, give me your hand. Put your hand right here. There's a famous painting by the painter Caravaggio it's called The Incredulity of Thomas. If you don't know it, I would invite you to look it up. The Incredulity of Thomas. And Thomas, in this painting, Jesus has Thomas's hand, and Jesus is putting Thomas's hand in his side, and Thomas can't even bear to look at it. Because here's something that's important for us to know about Thomas. Thomas didn't need to know that he didn't just need to know that Jesus was alive. He needed to know that Jesus had actually dead. Thomas wasn't there. How do I know that he was dead? How do I know that this isn't just be one more way that I'm going to get hoodwinked? How many of us have parts of our lives in which we feel that we've been hoodwinked by God? I was expecting my life with Jesus to be this, and it's turned out to be this. Are you with me? We all have those things. And so Jesus needs to do this for Thomas, not just so that Thomas can know, not just so that Thomas can prove that Jesus is alive, but for Thomas to know that Jesus is unafraid of Thomas's wounds as well. Thomas is not just coming to touch Jesus' wounds. Thomas is coming to have his wounds be touched by Jesus. Who are the people that you are willing to allow to touch your wounds? I don't mean just one time. I mean on a regularly cadenced basis. Because then we go back, because then Thomas is he's all over it, right? My Lord and my God. And Jesus says, what? You've just touched this and you believe? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. Which means Jesus is acknowledging that this work of belief is not easy to do. It is not, we said at the beginning, following Jesus is difficult. It's hard. We're reminded then about the opening part of this chapter. And what do we read? And Jesus breathed on them. And he said to them, receive the Holy Spirit. As the Father has sent me, so I'm sending you. Now, we have all kinds of ideas. We would just be God sent Jesus, Jesus sends us, got it. But he says, as the Father has sent me, so I'm sending you. And how has Jesus been sent into this room? He comes into the room as a peacemaker, and then he reveals his wounds. I want to invite us to consider that one of the primary features of the care of our soul and the expansion of the Eden blessing into the wilderness, the creation and curation of beauty and goodness in the world, begins with the exposure of our wounds in those circles of people for whom it is proper to do so. And this becomes the gospel. This is what it means for us to be sent into the world by the Father. We were talking at the break about what it means. I mean, how many of us, we live, and this is not new. Look, the Romans were like this, the Greeks were like this, humans were like this. Humans, we are people of hubris. We are a people of arrogance. We are people who believe that the way that that might makes right. We're people that believe that if you don't like what I have to give you, I have violence to respond to you with this. And whether or not that's just going to be like with my tanks, or it's going to be with my voice, or with my silence, or with my indignation. How many of us have been in board meetings where you offer something and it's just kind of summarily ignored? Anyway, you go to cocktail parties? You do that? Okay, I'm just checking. As a Quaker, we didn't even know what that meant, right? So you go and you're having conversations, and in the middle of a conversation with 3 or 4 other people, and you say something, and it kind of gets utterly, eerily silent, and they just kind of move on without, you know what that feels like? Like you've just been dismissed. And oh, come on, it's not that big of a deal. It's yeah, okay, I'll go find another group of people to talk to. But it is the death of 1,000 cuts. This is how evil operates. It is an act of violence. Tanks don't begin with tanks. They begin with small comments. They begin with small slights, small dismissals, small moments in which we end up feeling invisible. But we have no one to whom we name this. And so I have to burn energy to contain that. And if I do that, then I'll learn to do that again and again and again and again. And before you know it, I'm starting to have some kind of experience in which my brain is trying to tell me the way you're trying to live your life is not working. And so what do? I double down. I don't come to those by whom I'm being deeply known and reveal my wounds. I want to invite us to consider that what Jesus shows the disciples in John chapter 20 is the very thing that we talk about when we talk about what happens with the brain, with the mind, when it is dysregulated, when it is broken, what happens when we are revealed to others? What happens when I am seen deeply by others? I will tell you what happens is that my anxiety is reduced and my capacity to imagine my life differently because you do first is expanded. In our practice, we have something that we've developed over the last, if you look at the very beginning, it probably started somewhere between 15 and 20 years ago, but it's become more formalized, and we used, and I talk about this as we're in the lab, but the work that we do is in what we call the model of what we call confessional communities. Now, some of you here may be familiar with this, you've heard of this, but many of you haven't. And when we talk about these things, we say, even though it's in a clinical practice, what these are primarily about is about spiritual formation. It is about soul care. That's what these things are primarily about. And the way these gatherings work is, if you think about that there is an exterior sphere, if you think it begins with this outer sphere that carries everything, and it's a sphere of what we would call Christian anthropology. What does it mean for us to be human? A lot of that we've been talking about here, but there's a lot more that we could say about that. But that's the defining quality. What does it mean for us to be human from a biblical perspective? What does it mean for me to be male and female? What does it mean for us to be generative? What does it mean for us to create and curate beauty and goodness? What does it mean for us to set limits? What does it mean for us to repair ruptures? What does it mean for us to sometimes create ruptures that are on the way to creating beauty and goodness? All those kinds of things. But within that, we also talk an awful lot about interpersonal neurobiology, all this science that we talk about the mind, and we talk about what it means for us to flourish. We talk about attachment processes. We talk about the fact that we don't develop secure attachment without being seen, soothed, safe, secure, or without learning the art of repairing ruptures. In order for me to develop resilience, I must have experiences of suffering. Notice when Paul talks about suffering in Romans chapter 5, he assumes that everybody suffers, and we all do. We suffer for 3 reasons, mainly. We suffer, number one, because of things that have happened to us. Everybody here in this room has had things that have happened to us that feel minor or major. We've all had them. And even right now, we're thinking of them. Number two, we suffer because of things that we do to ourselves. And far and away, the vast majority of our suffering is because of this reason. My uncle abused me from the time I was 6 to the time I was 14, but now I'm 45. My uncle died 15 years ago, but what am I doing in my own mind to myself in the process? Now, I come by it honestly, but it is still the fact that so much of my suffering is because of my response to my pain. But if I'm not with someone who can help me regulate this, I will find myself by myself with this. Are you with me? And so a great deal of suffering takes place. We like to talk about suffering being the human response over time to pain. My response to pain over time. I can have a horribly painful thing happen, but if it only lasts for 10 minutes, not so bad. I can have a pebble in my shoe, but if I can't get rid of it for 2 hours while I'm walking, That comment that my best friend made last week at coffee, but hasn't called me back to say I'm really sorry about, I am thinking about this, right? And I think like, oh, it's my friend's comment that is causing my suffering. I will assure you, it's you who's causing your suffering. Because I'm doing something. I'm making, first we sense, and then we make sense of what we sense. Are you with me? I'm doing all these things, and I'm angry because of my best friend. Well, actually, you're angry because you've been feeding this for the last 2 weeks. And I haven't had a way to regulate this, and I need co-regulation. I need somebody else who, it's not good for the man to be alone, neurobiologically. My brain needs somebody else's brain in order for me to co-regulate. Otherwise, I become anxious. The third reason I suffer, we could talk about all this, third reason I suffer is because I'm going to choose to run toward the light. The kingdom of God is a narrow path, and the gate is also equally narrow. Jesus says this in the Sermon on the Mount, right? It's a narrow path. It's a hard road, right? The kingdom of God, right, we said already, only 25% of the seed that's spread by the sower becomes fruit. You're with me? It's hard to do. Anybody here who is an addict? That would be all of us, right? We're all addicts. Some of our addictions are just a little more obvious than others. The Bible calls this idolatry. But the thing that I choose to give myself to that I can't live without, otherwise I get anxious. And why am I anxious? Because I don't have my thing. No, I'm anxious because I am alone. My thing has been the thing that I've convinced myself that if I have this, then I'll be okay, but it only makes me more anxious and more in need of the thing that I need. Are you with me? And we all have these. And if we're going to enter into sobriety, if we're going to do what Moses and Joshua commanded the Israelites to do, to rid the land of all of the Canaanite gods, that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work for me to say no to my addictions, and I will do it imperfectly, but I will tell you, these three guys that I meet with every Tuesday morning, these are the guys who know that I'm talking about my addictions every single Tuesday in some way, shape, or form. We all are. Because my addiction will not end until glory. This is the thing. This is because why? Because it's linked to the fact that we are eternal beings. It's all Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 and 20. Are you with me? You dig this? You right? I'd like to think I have given up my thing, whatever my thing is, for 10 days. I think I'm done. You're like, gee, David went to his grave because he had, in the way that he did, because he had unfinished business from his childhood. Look at David. You know David, the king? You know this cat, right? We know this guy. He gets into trouble in the end of his life. Right? You think that was a bad decision. But what's the first thing you see about this guy? You get to the opening lines about David's life. Samuel is looking to a new king, and he goes to the house of who? Jesse. Okay, we know this, right? He goes to the house of Jesse, and what does he do? Bring me your sons. Bring me all your sons. What does Jesse do? He brings them all, except one. We don't know why he didn't bring David. Does Jesse know what Saul's up to? He's like, no. I know my son. Now, you all maybe have watched the Amazon show of David. Trust me, that's not really what you want to be watching. It's fine. But for some reason, Samuel doesn't bring David. Jesse doesn't bring David. Is he worried for him? Is he forgettable? I don't know. But 2 chapters later, Jesse sends David to the front to be with his brothers, and he goes, and what do? They scorn him. They mistreat him. something is not right in the house of Jesse. Are you with me? David is an amazing guy in the face of things not being okay. And again, the writers are brilliant. They don't say, dear reader, please recognize that things are not okay in the house of Jesse. You know why? Because if we were to allow our lives to be the text, there'd be lots of stuff that people wouldn't be saying about us either. They would read our lives and be like, they don't know. We don't know. Then you get to him bringing the law into Jerusalem, and he's dancing, right, doing his thing. And what does his wife do? She publicly humiliates him. And you're thinking, like, why is it so shocking that this guy wants to, like, have sex with Bathsheba? This isn't just about her. It's not even primarily about her. It's about other things that he didn't get taken care of that started a long time ago. When Jesus says, if you all don't change and become like little children, heaven's not going to work for you. And this is not just about having the posture of a child. This is about recognizing that we have things in our childhood that are unfinished business, that if we are not tending to, heaven is going to. Are you with me? And so this is what it means for us to come with our wounds, as we read about in John chapter 20. And so in these groups, we're talking about all these different things, about the neuroscience and about suffering, and why giving up our addictions is hard to do. Evil would much rather you try to, like, give up your addiction by yourself. But anybody who knows about this, anybody who knows about our idolatry knows that this is not how we're going to do this. We are going to form who we become in the power of the Holy Spirit, the presence of the text, the body of believers. And so in these small gatherings, we have this outer rim Christian anthropology, we have this neuroscience, and inside of that, we pay attention to what we call group dynamics. What happens in the room? Let me give you an example of some things that happen in the room all the time. Anybody here ever been in a meeting of any kind in which the meeting was set for a certain thing? It might be like an elder board meeting. They're juicy, right? It might be an elder board meeting. It might be in your company. It might be in your faculty with your school. It could be any number of things. And we're here to talk about the budget. And while we're talking about the budget, Sarah or John starts to talk about things in such a way that, like, we're not really comfortable with. You ever had that happen? Where somebody in the room starts to talk about things, like maybe John talks too much. And John is, like, going on and on about the budget. And before long, what we discover is that I'm kind of tired of listening to John. Are you with me? I'm tired of listening to John. But nobody is going to tell John that we're tired of listening to John, because we're here to talk about the budget. Because what's happening? Something's happening in the room, and it's not the budget. Are you with me? It's John. Okay. But let me just say, like, it's not just John. It's the entire system. Because John is talking as much as he's talking because the group allows him to do so. Nobody says, John, we love hearing you talk for about, 2 minutes, and then we'd like you to take a pause because I'm just feeling kind of left out of the conversation. Like, nobody, because, are you with me? This is what it means, and would it feel vulnerable to do that? Yeah, but what are we? We're vulnerable creatures. We're naked, and we need John to shut up. We need John to stop. But I don't just want to say, John, shut up. I need to have ways in which I can actually not just name things about the interior part of my mind. I need to be able to recognize that what God wants to do is not just inside me individually, inside you individually. God wants to do the things within me that he wants to do in the process that's happening in the room. Things were, in John 20, when Jesus enters into the room, he doesn't just come and give them words. Things start to happen in the room. You can guarantee, if you're one of these, you're like, holy cow. Right? Are you with me? And so these gatherings are not intended to simply have people come and share their problems and then provide for them solutions, and they go home and there they are. So this is how these groups are the groups just in general. Does that make sense what I told you so far? Okay, so we gather together and we have what we call a storytelling liturgy. And the reason we say this is because human beings, unlike any other creature, are storytellers. In fact, we have to tell stories in order for us to survive. I'm telling stories all the time. Major stories, minor stories. Some of you are sitting here and thinking, like, I should have gone to the bathroom. You're thinking, some of you are thinking, like, I have to go to the bathroom, and so you go, right? I mean, but we're these minor things. But some of you are thinking, gosh, ever since we started this morning, I'm thinking about how much I miss my uncle, who was the one person in my family that really paid attention to me. Gosh, I'm thinking about all the things. We tell stories in order to survive because we are image bearers. Unless you're like in a C.S. Lewis novel or a Gary Larson, thing, like animals are not telling stories in the way that we do. And we tell large stories, we tell small stories, and the way we tell stories is how we are coping. That is how we build the boat that we have that's floating on top of our sea of shame and fear, the stories that we tell. And what is the gospel? The gospel is God's story in which he is trying to get us to tell our story through his eyes and with his voice. He wants to come in to the story that we are telling. The disciples were in the room in John 20, and they're telling a particular story even without words. The doors are closed and they're locked, and the story that we're telling is we are in danger. Are you with me? We often hear, we have parts of our lives where we think, like, I'm in danger. I am in danger. I don't say that out loud, but I live with my body as if that's the case. I'm in danger. That's why I don't say this thing to my wife. That's why I don't say this thing to my husband. And when we are in danger and we feel it, what does Jesus say? Come closer. He doesn't say, here's more information. Go apply that. He says, come closer. And so this is why we gather into this space, because Jesus came into this space where they believed that they're in danger, and he's like, peace. But how does he do it? He doesn't come with a sword. He doesn't come with a charger. He doesn't come, breaking down the door. He comes silently and reveals his wounds. This is how he does this. And so we have a storytelling liturgy that we develop because we know that we are people who tell stories all the time. And, we invite people to come to join these groups. And, of course, when you think about this, especially in a psychiatric practice, people think, oh, I'm coming because I have a particular problem. Because, we humans, we are primarily problems to be solved. We are primarily diagnoses to be made and treated. We are not necessarily icons of beauty that are waiting to be revealed. You with me? But we tell them, no, actually what you are is an icon of beauty. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, not yet, you don't. And so we invite them to come, and we give them a storytelling liturgy. There's a particular way that we do this. They tell their story is reflected to them, back and forth. We can talk more about that maybe later. But eventually, things start to happen within the group. And the way these groups tend to emerge, these formational groups, because we let people know, like, look, this is not primarily because you are psychiatric patients who have diagnoses that we're trying to treat. You are objects of beauty and goodness that are waiting to emerge, and this is the studio where it's going to happen. So here's how it often starts out. People will come to a group. We come to church like this. We do this. And here's how we come to church. Here's how we come to these groups. I come because it's this thing that I do. I want to come listen to a sermon. I want to come get something from this that will help me go back into my real life and live it well. Would that be fair to say? Right. Now, that's not a bad thing. People come to these gatherings. There are about 6 or 8 people that will be in these gatherings. People come to these gatherings because I hope that I come to the gathering in order for me to obtain something from the group that I can then take and apply and live in my real life, right? Because they believe that their real life is someplace other than being in this group. This isn't real. I mean, I'm paying you to be my friends, for crying out loud, right? We often do this with church. I come to the church, I come to the small group, I come to these kinds of things because I want to get what I need in order for me to then go live in my real life. I want to tell you, today, here, this is your real life. You think, no, Curt, my real life is like out on the bouncy house. That's my real life is waiting for me back at 3 o'clock this afternoon when I've got all these things that I have to get done on Monday morning. That's my real life. Look, right now, this is the only time you have. You don't know that you have 5 minutes from now. I certainly don't. And so, what are we going to do with this? But we think that, I'm going to come and this is the first phase of all communities. We come, like we come to church to get the thing that I need so I can go live my real life. You're with me? Then we get to the second phase. Now, these phases are not the same for everybody. Not everybody enters into them at the same pace. And there's not like some sharp demarcating line between these three different phases. The second phase, though, is something like this. And I tell people it's kind of like going to Home Depot. You know, you go to Home Depot because you have a plumbing problem in your house. Like we go to small groups. We go to church because I got a plumbing problem. And I get help for my plumbing problem, and I go home and I fix the plumbing problem. But you know, if I go to Home Depot often enough, I start to see other people that are also coming around the same time that I come to Home Depot. And they're also in the room trying to get their plumbing problems fixed. And we start to talk to each other, and we start to share interesting stories and ways that we can help. And it's great because now I don't feel so alone with my plumbing problem that is at home. Are you with me? We come to church. We come to small groups. And we have this felt sense of people seeing me. So because what I'm really going to do, my real life is still outside this community. And then people will enter into a third phase. And it never fails that it both surprises them, because we tell them about this ahead of time, because it both surprises them and then they see when the penny drops. And here's what happens. And I tell people, like, at some point, you come to Home Depot enough, and you see the same characters there, and it's all great because we're all working on these things, and then you come to Home Depot one day, and you discover that Home Depot has a plumbing problem. What do you mean by that? Because we come to groups in order to get help, but if we are willing to be vulnerable enough, if we are willing to be open enough, if we are willing to reveal who we really are enough, at some point, I'm going to piss somebody off. At some point, I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings. At some point, I am going to be not working so hard to make sure that I put my best foot forward, and I'm going to put my worst foot forward, and in my mouth or whatever, and there's going to be a rupture at Home Depot. And we come to recognize pretty quickly that is in this space is where my real life is happening. Because this is now actually the kind of place where I am working really hard on the very things, not just because I'm acquiring information, but because I'm being seen by others. Others are being seen by me. And I am now having a transformational experience in this space that when I then go out to my quote-unquote real life, other people are asking the question, what happened to you? Something's different about you. These disciples don't just take the information of we saw Jesus. This is what they tell Thomas. We've seen him. It's information. Thomas is like, nope, not until I put my hand where it matters. They've seen him. They were not like, hey, can we put our hands? Like Thomas, remember, he's the guy who's willing to tell it like it is. Are we willing to do that? To the degree that we are willing to vulnerably enter into each other's brokenness, to our longings, to our griefs, in this context of the presence of the Spirit, in light of the text of Scripture, what happens to us when we are so willing to be real with each other that the Spirit transforms who we are in real time and space right here? Are you with me? We have on multiple occasions had the question put to us unsolicited, why can't this be church? I said, well, because we meet weekly for 90 minutes. And I said, well, if when we first arrived, we had 2 worship songs, and then at about the 45-minute part, we would have about a 10 to 15-minute homily with a text. And then when we're getting to the end, we'd have the Eucharist. Church is what we would have. But the bulk of what we would be doing would be formation. The bulk of what we would be doing would be transforming soul care. That's what we're actually doing in this moment. Are you with me? One of the other comments that is frequently made to us is this. Because, I've got a couple of books. The last two books that I've written kind of highlight some of this and tell a bunch of stories about how these things transform and how people's lives actually come to be changed. Because here's just a quick example. You can read about this in The Soul of Desire. There was a woman in one of our groups who had a really painful marriage experience. Her husband had been an adulterer and all those kinds of things that go wrong with that. And you can imagine. And she's trying to figure out, like, what does it mean for me to be a Jesus follower? What does it mean for me to, like, work through all these kinds of things, these painful things? And her husband had been just really unspeakably, like, just a bad actor. And little did she know, and there are other people in the group who are being empathic with her and so forth and so on. And at one point, there's another guy in the group who had been in the group for some time. I mean, this is the other thing, right? Like, we have parts of our stories, we come in, we tell the parts of our stories, but we know that there will always be parts of our stories, some of the parts of our stories that we do know that we're not going to tell people, even though we know this is what we're supposed to do. And then there are going to be parts of our stories that we don't even know that we're not telling people. And the only way that I get to that is because I tell more and more and more of my story until we get to it. And in this moment, this had been a guy who had been in the group for some time, but there was one secret that he hadn't told. And the secret was that he'd been a guy who also had to work through a troubled marriage, but that also included his on a transcontinental, he was a business guy, he's going transcontinental, he's going to Europe frequently, and he has an affair. And with the woman that he has the affair, she gets pregnant. But he doesn't know this until later. She tells him that she is. She keeps the child, but she says, I'm never having any contact with you. Are you with me? Now, this is a story that he's not telling anyone in the group. I knew about this, but he's not telling anyone in the group. Humans, we do all kinds of things. And it's easy for us to look at this gentleman and think, like, man, what a scoundrel. And one of the reasons why he's afraid to tell this story is because of the woman who's in the group. Are you with me? And after she eventually gets to a point where she is starting to work through this, he says, I've got some things to say. And he's like trembling. But I want to invite us, like, this is where Jesus is, like, he's put on his boots, he's going to work. He's going to work. This guy starts to talk about things that he hadn't said to anybody in the room. You can imagine the felt sense of betrayal, anger, all the things that he says, but that finally, another woman, after he says this, of course, we're working through this not just over one meeting together, over 2 or 3 meetings together. There's another one who says, I'm so glad, John, I'm so glad that you told this story, because at least you're somebody who's willing to do the repair work in here about something that you did. I have way too many experiences with men who are willing to be men and not willing to repair the ruptures that they've created. But it's happening in this room, and the woman who began this storytelling thread begins to understand what it means to forgive. Not because she's doing it in the abstract with her husband, who's like a bad actor, but because she's doing it in real time and space with an embodied person who's sitting across the room from her. Are you with me? And this is what we mean when we say, this is how souls are formed. This is how we do the kind of work that Jesus is doing in John 20. We're not claiming that this is perfect. We're not suggesting that this is the way to do this. I'm though suggesting that what we do in these groups is a reflection of the first 2 chapters of Genesis, what we're really trying to do. And so my questions for us would be these. Who are the people by whom you are being so deeply known, who become so familiar with your story and you become familiar with theirs, that there's nothing about you that they don't know, and there's nothing about them that you don't know? Because you're creating space for the Spirit to do the work that only the Spirit can do in that context when we are deciding not to remain in a room with the doors closed and locked. But we are inviting Jesus to be in the middle of this. In order for us to be cared for, in order for us to be transformed, in order for us, even in our suffering, to not be left alone, in order for us to co-create with God and each other beauty and goodness in the world. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Round.